Hey everyone, if you have been watching the last couple of videos, you'll notice the Cobra looks a whole lot different than it did. Biggest reason is it's up in the air by several feet, and the wheels and tires on it, well, they're permanently attached now, or at least actually put on properly as opposed to just sitting there with a single lug nut. And if you look carefully, you will see that the engine is in, and so is transmission. So I'll just talk through a couple of the things that are relating to everything you see here. I put the engine and transmission in today. A buddy of mine came and helped out with that. Definitely not a one-person job. You know, like anything, you probably could do it by yourself, but I've taken a lot of engines in and out of cars before by myself, but this is probably one where if I'd tried that, it would have been a lot harder. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, basic thing to start, when you're putting in the engine on one of these factory 5 Cobras, it's you know, you have a whole lot of room in the engine bay, and if you take a look, this engine is mounted really far towards the back of the car. I mean, obviously I don't have the timing cover on the engine yet or the water pump, but even when I do, you know, even the pulleys are going to be behind the front tires completely. This engine is set way back to try to keep the center of gravity as far aft as possible and get as much weight on the rear tires as you can. And that's one of the things that's really good with these cars. They tend to have, from what I've read, more weight on the rear wheels than on the front wheels, and that's really what you want. But there's a couple of things that go with that aft placement. So first one I'll just point out, so I'm doing air conditioning and heat, which a lot of people have asked Ted, why are you doing that? And biggest reason why I'm doing it is because this is a car that I want to spend as much time driving on the road as possible, and it's kind of like riding a motorcycle. If you've got a little bit of heat, I'm going to put in heated seats, and then having the heater blowing a little bit of hot air, that's going to help make it more comfortable to drive for more months out of the year, especially if you got days where it's kind of chilly in the morning and then it warms up in the afternoon. And air conditioning, sort of the same thing. In the summer here in Kansas, a lot of times the morning's great, but then when you go home from work in the afternoon, it's above 90, and anything that can just help take the edge off a little bit is worthwhile. Other reason is that I wanted to experiment with an electric air conditioning compressor. I'll do another video on that when it gets closer. But the real thing is, here's the box. Here's the box that has to go forward to the firewall for the air conditioning and the heat. And you can see it's really close to this passenger side head. It clears just enough, but it is close. I also did try putting the intake on after I got the engine in, and the intake will go on. If you see this stud right here, this stud cannot be in. I actually had to take the stud out, and I'm either going to have to do something where I put the nut on the stud before and put it in the intake before putting it all in, or I may even have to just take that stud out entirely and go with a bolt in that location, which would be fine. The only real reason I'm using studs is because the intake needs studs in these center holes. So then the other thing, and I'll show you underneath the car, benefit of the lift makes this easy. So on these cars, you've got this cross member here, which great, adds a whole lot of rigidity. You know, when you take a look at the frame is really just a big box. You've got these 4-inch round tubes, and then you got the cross members in the front and in the back. And this cross member is this aft cross member is really as far back as it can go, but you do have this little bit of the tail housing hanging over it. So what goes along with that? You can see there. So, and you have to have it there. You can't have it any further back because then the drive shaft comes through here, and you can see it's going to be a very short drive shaft, which these cars have, and that also creates a couple of issues, mainly that you can't have you can't use a T56 transmission in these cars unless you have an independent rear suspension where the differential is solidly located, because otherwise it'll bind when it goes up and down. So you do have some geometry issues there. But yeah, so when you're putting, the real thing that this crossmember does that makes the installation hard is that as you're getting the engine and transmission in, you have to, you can't just let the transmission hang down like you can in most cars. You have to actually get the engine and transmission in and then get it level so that you can move, so that you can keep the tail housing over there. And so what we did to help with this was we played a couple of games with the motor mounts. So what we ended up doing was we took these bolts off of the motor mounts where they attach to the engine, and then we put this nut on loosely, and then we had to play a couple of games with it to get it to line up. And so then we got it to where the engine was basically this much further forward, just a couple of inches, and then we were able to kind of wiggle it back. So it took a while, and of course we were being careful because we didn't want to ding anything up on the car itself, but got it in. So other things that we did that got done, I bled the brakes on the car, so now pedal's nice and firm, and then put the wheels and tires on the car so we could roll it around, and we had to roll it forward a little bit to get it so that it would go onto the lift. One thing I did notice when we were rolling it around is a lot of people will say how you need power steering on these cars, especially specifically when you're moving around at low speeds. And I don't have a steering wheel on the car yet, so to turn the wheel, I was just grabbing the steering shaft there with my hand and twisting it. And just doing that after the engine was installed, I didn't have any problems turning the front wheels, and these tires are 275, so they're wide. So I can't imagine if I was just grabbing that shaft and I have no advantage of a steering wheel, that this is actually going to be a problem. So I'm becoming really glad that I went with the manual steering, just because it's simpler, saves some weight, looks better, and I think it's going to be just fine. I'm still going to run higher caster numbers, like what they recommend with power steering, and that should be, I should have that. I have the first best guess dialed in, but I haven't, I obviously can't spend any time trying to get the alignment correct just yet. So, but anyway, brakes are bled, engine and transmission are in, wheels and tires are on, and things are pretty good. Right now, everything's torqued down. So, my wife gets home from work on Tuesday, and usually I'm just working on this when she's away on her 8-day shift. So, I'm probably pretty much done for this shift home. My goal is maybe tomorrow I'll do a couple of other little button-up items that I can. I might rivet a couple more panels on, and then next week I'll have all of the bolts I need for the timing cover, and I'll put that on and put on the oil pan that's supposed to show up, and go from there. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you like it, and I'll give you some more updates soon. Bye.